I've been pessimistic about fasting, intermittent fasting. I could probably crush a 3,000 calorie meal for dinner without too much discomfort. Like, oh, I'm low on running energy, I'm gonna take another gel, I'm gonna take another sports drink. So they're just like overshooting what their body can tolerate. Pushed myself to a point where my body's burning high levels of fat.
How are you utilizing intermittent fasting? Because I find that to be really fascinating. You're already a thin guy, you're already in amazing shape, and most people are using it to like lose weight. I don't think you can afford to lose weight, right?
Yeah, I've been pessimistic about fasting, intermittent fasting for the majority of my running career, and even into the high fat, low carb stuff, where I think that usually finds its way into that community a little quicker. Partly just because of I'm looking at it from an energy expenditure standpoint versus a time standpoint. So if someone does like a 16-8 like feeding window at just resting metabolic rate there, or maybe a better way to say it, let's say they do a 24-hour fast. If I do a 24-hour fast, I'm probably burning somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 2,000 calories, 1,600 to 2,000 calories if I'm not doing any activity. Now I do that 24-hour fast with a 20-mile run. Physiologically, it might feel like a 48-hour fast. So if I'm doing that every day, like the OMAD folks are eating one meal a day, I might be sending a signal to my body that like, oh, you get food every other day, essentially. So I don't know where the science is in terms of how that works, but I feel like as an athlete, certainly for a performance perspective, you got to look at it from an energy scarcity standpoint as much as you do any sort of benefits you're getting from the lack of food for long periods of time. So I don't do a whole lot of it historically. I've played around with a little bit more the last year or so when I'm in down season, or like right now where I'm running very little, just because I'm not demanding much more than say 2,500 calories a day from my body versus the 4,000 I might be demanding when I'm training for something. So it gives me a little bit.
Do you tend to eat before training, or do you try to load up more afterwards?
Yeah, so I typically kind of have a 2 main meal structure that's like foundation, and that's going to be like I'm going to have foods that are pretty consistent in there, so I'm hitting like micronutrients, macronutrients at what I would need for baseline, and then I'm just going to titrate up based on workload. So those 2 meals might start out as like 1,000 each when I'm doing little to nothing, and then let's say I start adding in 60 minutes of running. Now I might need to bump that up to like either add extra food to one of those 2 meals or both of them. Usually I get to a point where it's usually around maybe 1,500 calories, where now all of a sudden eating more than that is just uncomfortable in a sitting. So I'm more likely going to add a third meal or a snack or some sort of liquid calories either before the run when I wake up in the morning, or between the 2 training sessions during the day, that sort of thing. I find I could probably crush a 3,000 calorie meal for dinner without too much discomfort, because then you just pass out and go to bed and wake up in the morning. But if I had to do that in the morning, then it'd be my energy levels will tank if I eat too much in one sitting during the day. So I try not to bolus up that meal too much.
How important is it to plan out your poops?
I'm really lucky with that. I'm usually a big poop in the morning, and then that's that. So I wake up in the morning basically pretty consistently, especially if I have coffee. Then it's take care of that, and then I'm basically done. Really, the difference.
You're blessed.
Well, I am. When the one thing I do keep an eye on though is because I've done within low carb, I've done everything from almost plant-based to almost meat-based, everything in between. When I was almost plant-based, that was a lot less controllable because I was eating so much fiber that then I would I felt like I'd go to the bathroom in the morning, and then I might go again before I head back out, go out for that run. I might go again after my next meal, and it was just that was just super inconvenient and not very desirable, which is one of the reasons why I was okay, I'm gonna skew away from that much fiber. Animal-based, when I was primarily that, it was the most consistent because it's not nearly as voluminous, and there's really not much more than 1 trip a day worth of stuff inside you.
Why do you think so many runners have issues with digestion? Runners trot is a thing, and then you mentioned I think you said 60 to 70% experience some sort of digestive issue on the day of a race, and I guess that makes sense because the liquids and all the different things you take during a race. But with race aside, what do you think is the contributing factors to people having just digestive issues that run a lot?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm guessing it's multifactorial, but part of it is probably I mean, think of it like this. Like, I'm 140 pounds. The amount of food volume required to fuel a 140 pound frame is quite low. Now you add big training to that. Now that small frame is eating for maybe 2 of them. So you just got twice as much food volume moving through you as you would had you done nothing or very little training. So that's probably part of it. The other part is I just think like the kind of the vertical jostling of running is probably going to speed up digestion a little bit. So you might have a quicker transit time. So rather than it taking 24 hours for something to move through you, it might only take 8 to 12 or something like that. And you add that on top of extra food volume, and it just kind of speeds everything up. That'd be my guess. Some of it could also just be what are people replacing those excess calories or excess energy with, and if it's like a lot of like sugary processed things, it may just like wreck their digestive tract a little more, so they just end up getting irritable bowel syndrome a lot more easily than maybe someone who's not doing that stuff. It's weird because like I get like the idea behind eat clean for what you need, and then anything extra can be kind of what you want. But if the stuff you pick, what does Elaine say? Just don't eat like an asshole.
Right.
It's like I think a lot of people eat like an asshole after they hit that baseline, and like if you do that, then you're probably going to be more likely to have digestive issues. Right. My guess, but it is interesting.
Like what? So just run me through your protocol during the actual race, like for hydration.
Okay.
Or if you don't really like hydrate a whole ton, what is it that you're doing before the race that allows you to not have to do that?
So how I prep for the nutrition side of a 100-mile race, it kind of starts before the race itself. So for me, I'm reducing training volume and intensity as I'm tapering and resting up for it. So my energy output goes down. I follow a low carbohydrate diet, but what I do differently during that time of training versus that level of volume intensity during just a normal training block would be I leave my carbohydrates at their highest, which tends to be 20% or so of my intake, partly because I want to go into the race with intact full glycogen stores. So the reduction in training with my highest carbohydrate intake usually is enough to do that. But what I do, where I start to kind of shift things is the night before I've had my last meal, I go to bed. So I wake up in the morning leveraging an overnight fast. So that alone is going to encourage my body to burn higher rates of fat just from the overnight fast. So in the morning, that breakfast, I'm going to stay away from carbohydrates for longer races because I want to start that race burning high levels of fat. If I introduce a big carby breakfast, that's going to more likely push me towards skewing my ratios closer to burning carbohydrates. So fats and proteins for breakfast, oftentimes low fiber, so liquid, like nut butters.
Foods you're used to too, right?
Yep, yeah, like heavy whipping cream type stuff, that sort of thing can usually fit real well in there. I might put like a scoop of protein powder in there since I'm not going to be eating as much protein during that day as I would if I were sitting down to full meals. Then I start the race, and I wait about 45 minutes to start introducing carbohydrates. So kind of like we talked about on the podcast, I'm defending muscle glycogen because that's the tank I could deplete even if I'm burning super high levels of fat. For me, the target range is up to about 40 grams of carbohydrate per hour, or roughly 200 calories. And that's going to be about enough for me to defend muscle glycogen for a 100-mile intensity. And I'm just basically hitting that every hour. And I'll do a blend between a powder I'll mix in with my drink called Asfield's Race Plus, which is mostly carbohydrate with small amounts of fat and protein. So it's like 16 grams of carbohydrate and then like around 4 grams of fat and protein. And the reason you want a little bit of fat and protein, even though you may not be directly using that in the moment, is it can slow down the rate of digestion, which you kind of want, because sometimes what people do is these engineered sports products are almost too good at what they do, where your body can use them really fast, and if you overshoot it a little bit, it can cause your body to pump fluid in your digestive tract, and then that's why we see such high rates of digestion issues with runners a lot of times is like, oh, I'm running out of energy, I'm going to take another gel, I'm going to take another sports drink. So they're just like overshooting what their body can tolerate. Body's pumping in fluid in their digestive tract to try to compensate, and then boom, it's coming up one way or the other, coming in or out one way or the other. So that kind of helps. And then what I also do is, since I'm out there running all day, rather than just doing that liquid energy source all day long, I'm mixing that with a more solid food option that's more whole food based or different flavor profile, different consistency. they call it palate fatigue in ultra running, where if I decided I'm going to have S Fuels Race Plus all day long, by 10 hours I might just be so sick of that flavor and that specific consistency that I'm just like unmotivated to have it and get behind, just because you're not like in a position to really get to take advantage of the plan you put in place. So I'll do something salty, crunchy, still mostly carbohydrate. So something like a salty cracker or a pretzel, or maybe some like sourdough bread with a little bit of nut butter on there, or a little bit of honey with it, or something like that. Will be some things I'll kind of blend in or rotate in there as I've kind of got into the race. But I'm basically hitting pretty much the same fueling within that context throughout the course of the race once I get 45 minutes in. Because once I get 45 minutes in, I've kind of pushed myself to a point where my body's burning high levels of fat, and a small introduction of carbohydrate isn't really going to push me away from burning fat. It's just going to supplement my glycogen store so I don't dip too low on that and have a performance dip from dipping too far into that. The other side is the hydration. So that actually plays along with nutrition a bit. If you get dehydrated or too low on electrolytes, I'll notice digestive issues from that. So then it's like you're eating your fuel, you're drinking your fuel, and you have a digestive issue, and you think, oh shoot, I overshot my nutrition or something like that. Well, maybe you just weren't doing the right electrolytes. So what I find works well for me is I do about 500 to 700 milligrams of electrolytes for every liter of water I take in. So then it's kind of fixed to what I need. At that point I can just drink to thirst. So if it's cool out in the morning, beginning of the race, and I only need a liter of water, well then I only need that 500 to 700 milligrams of electrolytes. As it warms up, maybe I'm taking an extra liter on top of it. I'm just making sure I have that electrolyte in that. So as I take more water on, I'm also taking on more electrolyte, and I'm keeping that kind of that balance of electrolytes to water consumption, and that kind of helps, blood volume, hydration status, and keeping the digestive issues from kind of flaring up. And that can range from everything from when I ran 11:19, it's 60 degrees indoors. So I would think I was doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 ounces every 30 minutes or so in there, and I've done races where I'm doing 4 times that much.
Wow.
So like where it's like almost 100 degrees and that sort of thing. And you just need to make sure where people run away, I think, or fall apart is with electrolytes, is they think I need this much electrolytes per hour, and they don't account for the extra fluid intake. So they might go from that 1 liter of water in that first hour with X amount of electrolyte to 3 liters in the heat of the day, but the same amount of electrolyte. Now they're diluting themselves a little bit. So unless they had a ton on board already, your body does do a pretty good job of keeping you from going too low on that, but it doesn't mean it won't come at an expense. So like with performance or digestion and things like that. So you have to be careful with that side of it too.